Joe Martinez had magic in his hands. When other mechanics gave up, when engines were declared dead, when cars were ready for the scrapyard, that's when Joe worked miracles. He could hear a problem from 3 blocks away, diagnose a failing transmission just by the sound of shifting gears, and bring any dead engine back to life with nothing but determination and decades of guilt driving his every move. Because Joe wasn't just fixing cars, he was trying to fix the unfixable. For 25 years, every engine he repaired was an attempt to repair the guilt that had been eating him alive. He'd killed his wife and daughter in a car accident, or so he thought, until the day that same wrecked car from 1998 was towed into his shop, and a dying man confessed something that turned Joe's entire world upside down. He realized he'd been living a lie for 25 years. Welcome to Still Human. Here, we explore the deepest truths about guilt, redemption, and the secrets that shape our lives. In this story, you'll witness how one man's quest to fix the world around him was really an attempt to fix the broken pieces of his own soul. This is about the weight of blame, the power of truth, and the moment when everything you believed about yourself turns out to be wrong. Before we dive into Joe's incredible journey, tell us where you're watching from today. Which city? Which country? Drop it in the comments. We love connecting with our global family. And if you believe that the truth, no matter how painful, is always worth finding, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell, because every day we share stories that prove our past doesn't have to define our future. Martinez Auto Repair sat on the corner of 5th and Main in a small Texas town where everybody knew everybody's business. The building was older than most of the cars Joe worked on. Faded brick, cracked windows, and a hand-painted sign that had been touched up so many times the letters looked like they'd been written by different people across different decades. But step inside Joe's garage and you entered a different world entirely. Joe Martinez, 52 years old, weathered hands that told stories of 10,000 repairs, and eyes that carried the weight of something much heavier than engine blocks. He had a reputation that stretched 3 counties wide. If Joe couldn't fix it, it couldn't be fixed. "Bring me your dead," Joe would joke with customers, but there was nothing funny about the way he worked. Every car that rolled into his shop was a puzzle demanding to be solved, a challenge that required not just mechanical knowledge, but something deeper, an understanding of how broken things could be made whole again. Mrs. Patterson's 1987 Honda that had been dead for 6 months, Joe brought it back to life in an afternoon. The Miller family's pickup truck that 3 other mechanics had declared totaled, Joe found the problem everyone else had missed and had it running like new. Young Tommy Rodriguez's first car, a beat-up Camaro his father said would never run again. Joe spent 2 weeks on it, refusing payment, because he remembered what it felt like to be a teenager who just needed something to work out right. The town had theories about Joe's almost supernatural abilities. Some said he could hear problems in engines the way doctors hear heart murmurs. Others claimed he had a 6th sense about mechanical failures. The truth was simpler and more complex than any of them imagined. Joe Martinez wasn't just a mechanic. He was a man trying to atone for the greatest mechanical failure of all time, the night his own car had failed him when he needed it most. But we'll get to that night. First, you need to understand what Joe had built in the 25 years since then. Joe understood that fixing cars was really about fixing lives. A car isn't just metal and rubber, Joe would tell his apprentices. It's trust. When someone hands you their keys, they're trusting you with their independence, their livelihood, their connection to the world. You don't just fix the engine. You fix their ability to move forward. But Joe himself had been stuck in the same place for 25 years, trapped by a memory that no amount of automotive expertise could repair. Martinez Auto Repair wasn't just a garage. It was a sanctuary for broken things and the people who loved them. Joe had hired 3 other mechanics over the years, but he remained the heart of the operation. He was the one people requested when their cars meant more than transportation, when they were the last connection to a deceased spouse, or the only way to get to a job that fed a family, or the vehicle that had been passed down through generations. December 23rd, 1998, the night that divided Joe's life into before and after. Joe had been 27 years old then, married to Maria Santos Martinez for 5 years, father to 8-year-old Isabella and 6-year-old Sofia. He was already known as the best young mechanic in town, the guy who could diagnose engine problems just by listening, who treated every car like it deserved respect. That night, Joe was working late at the shop, trying to finish Mrs. Chen's transmission repair before Christmas Eve. Maria had called twice, reminding him about Isabella's school Christmas pageant the next morning, asking when he'd be home. "Just another hour," Joe had promised. "I want to finish this so Mrs. Chen can visit her grandchildren for Christmas." It was after 11 p.m. 10 minutes for Maria's smile and checking on the girls and maybe watching a Christmas movie before bed. That's when it happened. Joe remembered the sound first. The screaming of brakes, the crunch of metal, the terrible silence that followed. He remembered the smell of burning rubber and the taste of blood in his mouth. He remembered the flashing lights, the paramedics, the police officer who kept asking him the same questions over and over. "Sir, can you tell me what happened? Sir, were you drinking tonight? Sir, do you remember falling asleep?" The accident report was clear. Vehicle crossed the center line at approximately 11:47 p.m., striking oncoming traffic head-on. Driver appears to have fallen asleep at the wheel. Blood alcohol, 0.00. No evidence of mechanical failure. Cause, driver, fatigue. Maria Santos Martinez, age 32, died on impact. Isabella Martinez, age 8, pronounced dead at the scene. Sofia Martinez, age 6, died en route to the hospital. Joe Martinez, age 27, survived with minor injuries and a guilt that would shape the next 25 years of his life. The funeral was a blur. The investigation was routine. The insurance was processed. Joe had fallen asleep driving home from work and killed his entire family. Case closed. Except Joe couldn't close it. Not ever. For months after the accident, Joe couldn't touch a wrench, couldn't look at a car without seeing Maria's face in the windshield, hearing Isabella asking when Daddy would be home, remembering Sofia's laugh that would never fill a room again. But eventually, Joe realized something. If he was going to live with what he'd done, he had to make sure it never happened to anyone else. He had to become the best mechanic in the world, so that no family would ever lose their lives because of a mechanical failure he could have prevented. Joe threw himself into work with the fury of a man trying to outrun his own shadow. He studied everything. Not just engines and transmissions, but accident reconstruction, vehicle safety, the physics of crashes. He learned how to spot problems before they became dangerous, how to fix small issues before they became fatal ones. Every car he repaired was Maria. Every engine he saved was Isabella. Every problem he solved was Sofia. For 25 years, Joe had been trying to fix the unfixable, and he'd almost convinced himself it was working. Until Tuesday, October 17th, 2023, when everything he thought he knew about that terrible night came crashing down. The tow truck arrived at Martinez Auto Repair just after 2 p.m. on a Tuesday that started like any other. Classic car restorations were his favorite projects, taking something beautiful that had been damaged by time and neglect and bringing it back to its original glory. But when Joe saw the car on the truck bed, his blood turned to ice. 1998 Toyota Camry, blue, the same model, the same year, the same color as the car he'd been driving the night he killed his family. "No," Joe whispered, his legs suddenly unsteady. "What's wrong?" Miguel asked, concerned by the look on Joe's face. Joe stared at the wrecked Camry, front end completely destroyed, driver's side caved in, roof partially crushed. It looked exactly like his car had looked after the accident, exactly like the images that haunted his dreams for 25 years. But that was impossible. Joe's car had been totaled, scrapped, destroyed. This couldn't be the same vehicle. "Who's the customer?" Joe managed to ask. The tow truck driver checked his paperwork. "Guy named Frank Morrison. Says this car's been sitting in his junkyard for 25 years, and he finally wants to restore it for his grandson. Weird project if you ask me. Car's pretty much totaled." Frank Morrison. Joe knew that name. Morrison Salvage was where they'd taken his car after the accident, where the twisted metal that had housed his family's final moments had been towed to rust and decay. "I need to see the VIN number," Joe said, his voice barely steady. It was his car, the 1998 Toyota Camry that had crossed the center line and destroyed everything Joe had ever loved. But why was Frank Morrison bringing it to him? Why now, after 25 years? "Tell Mr. Morrison I'll call him tonight," Joe told the driver. And be careful unloading her. This car means something." After the tow truck left, and the Camry sat in his garage, like a ghost made of metal and rust, Joe called the number Frank Morrison had left. The phone rang 4 times before a weak, elderly voice answered. "Martinez Auto Repair? This is Frank Morrison." "Mr. Morrison, this is Joe Martinez. You brought a car to my shop today, a 1998 Camry." "Ah, yes, Joe Martinez." Frank's voice carried a weight that Joe couldn't identify. "I've been wanting to talk to you for a very long time." "About the car?" "About what really happened that night, Joe. About what I should have told the police 25 years ago." Joe's workshop suddenly felt too small, the air too thin. "What are you talking about? Can you come to my house tonight? I'm dying, Joe. Cancer. And there's something you need to know before I go. Something about that accident." When Joe arrived that evening, Frank was sitting on his porch, oxygen tank beside his chair, looking like a man who'd been carrying a heavy secret for far too long. "Thank you for coming," Frank said, his voice raspy but determined. "I wasn't sure you would." Joe sat down across from him, his whole body tense with anticipation and dread. "Mr. Morrison, what did you mean when you said it wasn't my fault?" Frank reached into a folder beside his chair and pulled out a thick manila envelope. "Your car came to my yard the night of the accident. Standard procedure. Police had finished their investigation. Insurance company had written it off as totaled. My job was to strip it for parts and send the rest to scrap." "Okay." "But I always do a final inspection first. Professional habit. And that's when I found something the police missed." Frank handed Joe a photograph from the envelope. Look at this. The photograph showed the underside of Joe's wrecked Camry, specifically the brake system. Even 25 years later, Joe could see what Frank was pointing out. The brake line had been cut. Not worn through, not damaged in the accident. Deliberately severed. Someone sabotaged your car, Joe. Cut the brake line so it would fail gradually. You probably lost braking power slowly over the course of your drive home. Didn't even realize it until you needed to stop and couldn't. Joe stared at the photograph, his mind struggling to process what he was seeing. But I fell asleep. The police said I crossed the center line because I fell asleep. You crossed the center line because you couldn't brake for the curve. Look here. Frank showed him another photograph, the accident scene from a different angle. See how the skid marks start? You were trying to brake. You didn't fall asleep, Joe. Your brakes were sabotaged. The world seemed to tilt around Joe. 25 years of guilt, of believing he'd killed his family through his own negligence, suddenly crumbling like a house of cards. Why didn't you tell the police? Frank's face crumpled with shame. Because I was paid not to. Someone came to me the day after the accident, offered me $50,000 to dispose of your car without reporting what I'd found. Said it would be better for everyone if the case stayed closed. Said the family was dead anyway, and destroying your life too wouldn't bring them back. Who? Joe's voice was barely a whisper. Who paid you? Frank reached into the envelope again and pulled out a canceled check. The name on it made Joe's blood run cold. David Chen. Joe's former business partner, the man he'd trusted to run the financial side of their shared automotive business, while Joe focused on the mechanical work. I kept everything, Frank continued. The photographs, the check, even a piece of the cut brake line. I told myself I'd come forward someday, but $50,000 was a lot of money back then. My wife was sick, needed surgery we couldn't afford. I convinced myself that what was done was done. Joe's hands shook as he examined the evidence. David Chen. But why? Why would he? I did some research over the years trying to understand it myself. Turns out Mr. Chen had been embezzling from your business for months, stealing money, doctoring the books. You were getting close to finding out, weren't you? Planning to do an audit after Christmas. Joe's memory came flooding back. Yes, he had been concerned about some financial irregularities, had planned to sit down with David right after the holidays to go through the books together. The accident had happened before that meeting could take place. So he killed my family to cover up embezzlement. He sabotaged your car to kill you, Joe. Your family dying too was collateral damage. After the accident, David took over the business completely, claimed he was honoring his dead partner's memory. He cleaned out the accounts and disappeared within 6 months. Joe sat in stunned silence, trying to reconcile 25 years of believing he was a killer with the reality that he was actually just another victim. Mr. Morrison, why are you telling me this now? Frank looked out at his salvage yard, at the twisted metal monuments to other people's worst days. Because I'm dying, and I can't take this secret with me. Because you've spent 25 years trying to atone for something you didn't do. And because, he paused, his voice breaking, because I've watched you become the most honest, dedicated mechanic I've ever seen, and you deserve to know the truth. Joe looked at the evidence in his hands, photographs, documents, proof that everything he'd believed about himself was wrong. What am I supposed to do with this? Whatever you think is right, Joe. The statute of limitations has run out for most crimes, but murder doesn't have a statute of limitations. David Chen might still be out there somewhere. As Joe drove home that night, the weight of 25 years of guilt slowly lifting from his shoulders, he realized something profound. He'd become exactly the kind of man Maria would have been proud of, exactly the kind of father Isabella and Sophia deserved, not because he was trying to atone for killing them, but because that's who he'd always been meant to become. The truth hadn't changed the past, but it had finally set Joe free to embrace the future. Joe spent the next 3 weeks torn between relief and rage. Relief that he hadn't killed his family. Rage that David Chen had stolen 25 years of his life, along with everything else. But Joe was a mechanic, and mechanics solve problems methodically, one step at a time. First, he digitized all of Frank Morris's. He owned a small accounting firm, was married with 2 teenage children, and had apparently built a respectable life on the foundation of Joe's family's deaths. Joe could have turned the evidence over to police, could have sought legal justice through the courts. Instead, he did something that surprised everyone, including himself. He drove to Oregon to confront David Chen face to face. Joe found David leaving his office on a Tuesday evening, walking to the same kind of Toyota Camry that had been Joe's death trap 25 years earlier. For a moment, Joe just watched him, this man who had destroyed everything Joe loved and then disappeared into a new identity. "David," Joe called out. David Chen turned, and Joe saw the exact moment recognition hit. The blood drained from David's face, his briefcase fell from his hand, and he stumbled backward against his car. "Joe? But how did you find you? Took a while, but I'm good at solving problems." Joe walked closer, his hands steady despite the storm of emotions in his chest. "We need to talk." They sat in David's car in the empty parking lot while Joe laid out everything he knew. The cut brake line, Frank Morrison's confession, the embezzlement, the 25 years Joe had spent believing he was a killer. David broke down completely. "I never meant for them to die, Joe. I needed you gone. The audit would have exposed everything, and I would have gone to prison. I thought if you had an accident, just you, I could take over the business and pay back what I'd stolen. But it wasn't just me in the car that night. I know. God, Joe, I know. Do you think I haven't thought about Maria and Isabella and Sophia every single day for 25 years? Do you think I don't know I'm a monster?" Joe stared at this broken man who had once been his trusted partner. "What you did was unforgivable, David. But what I'm going to do might be worse." David looked up, confused and terrified. "I'm going to let you live with it," Joe continued. "You've built a life here, a family. You have children who love you, a wife who trusts you. I could destroy all of that with one phone call to the police. Instead, I'm going to let you carry the weight of what you did for the rest of your life, the same way I carried guilt that wasn't even mine." Joe reached into his pocket and pulled out a business card for Martinez Auto Repair. "But you're going to do something for me. Every month, you're going to send a check to the Maria, Isabella, Sophia Martinez Foundation, a scholarship fund I'm starting for children who've lost parents in car accidents. You're going to do this for the rest of your life, and you're going to remember why." David took the card with trembling hands. "Joe, Don't." Joe opened the car door. "And every time you think about taking the easy way out of a problem, remember that the easy way cost my family their lives." Joe walked away and never looked back. 6 months later, Martinez Auto Repair had a new mission. Yes, Joe still fixed cars with the same miraculous skill that had made him legendary, but now he also ran the Maria Isabella Sophia Martinez Foundation, using David Chen's monthly payments and donations from grateful customers to provide scholarships for children who'd lost parents in vehicle accidents. The foundation did more than provide money. It provided hope to families who thought their world had ended the same way Joe's world had ended on December 23, 1998. Frank Morrison passed away peacefully in his sleep 2 weeks after Joe's confrontation with David Chen. His final words to Joe were, "Thank you for letting me tell the truth. I can finally rest now." Joe kept the 1998 Camry that had started this journey of revelation, but instead of restoring it to its original condition, he transformed it into something else entirely, a teaching tool. He partnered with the local high school to use the car in driver's education classes, showing students how to recognize signs of mechanical failure, how to maintain their vehicles properly, and most importantly, how quickly a mechanical problem can become a tragedy. The car that had carried his family to their deaths became a vehicle for preventing other families from suffering the same loss. But the most important change was in Joe himself. For 25 years he'd been trying to atone for a sin he'd never committed. Now freed from that crushing guilt, he could finally grieve properly for the family he'd lost and the life he'd been robbed of. Joe started therapy, started dating, started allowing himself moments of joy without feeling like he was betraying Maria's memory. He realized that the best way to honor his family wasn't to punish himself for their deaths, but to live the kind of life they would have wanted him to live. And he kept fixing cars, because that's what Joe Martinez did. But now every repair was an act of love, not penance. Every engine he brought back to life was a celebration of second chances, not an attempt to resurrect the dead. The miracle wasn't that Joe could fix any car that came to his shop. The miracle was that he'd finally learned to fix himself. Today, the Maria Isabella Sofia Martinez Foundation has provided over 200 scholarships to young people who lost parents in vehicle accidents. David Chen has never missed a monthly payment, and Joe Martinez continues to work miracles in his garage, proving every day that broken things can be made whole again, including broken hearts. At Still Human, we believe that the truth, no matter how painful or how delayed, always has the power to set us free. Sometimes the heaviest burden we carry isn't our guilt, it's someone else's lies. Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell, because every day we share stories that prove it's never too late to discover who you really are. See you in the next story.